Good morning, I'm Maiki Oreta, and you're watching Basis Points, where we dive deep into the numbers and the stories that drive our economy and shape our world. The headlines. The Philippines' inflation rate quickens to 2.3% in October. Moody's analytics sees slower economic growth for the Philippines in the third quarter. Internet tycoon Dennis Uy is ceding control of his telecom venture as the Singapore-based Summit Telco Holdings is set to take over Dito CME Holdings. And a Pennsylvania judge denies a bid to block Elon Musk's daily $1 million giveaway to voters. First, let's take a quick look at the financial markets. U.S. stocks closed slightly lower after a choppy session. This as investors prepare for a crucial week with the volatile presidential race and Federal Reserve meeting on the radar.
Volatility is natural during November of election years. In fact, going back to World War II, the volatility within November has been 50% higher than the average volatility for the other 11 months of an election year. So just normally we'd seem to get it during this election month. However, that said, the market tends to advance close to about 3% in the final 2 months of the year, not really depending on who wins, but rather the fact that the uncertainty has come to an end.
Election uncertainty in the United States is also weighing on European markets. The Pan-European Stock 600 closed lower by 0.3%, with regional bourses and sectors broadly in the red. Over here in Asia, Pacific markets are trading mixed with the U.S. elections in focus. Japan's Nikkei 225 is up 0.7%. South Korea's Kospi down by 0.7%, while Australia's S&P ASX 200 is lower by 0.6%. In the commodities market, oil prices rise on heightened tensions in the Middle East and on OPEC's decision to delay restoring barrels to the market. Brent is up nearly 3%, trading at $75 a barrel, while gold is slightly down to $2,744 per ounce. As expected, the country's inflation rate snaps its 2-month deceleration streak. The Philippine Statistics Authority has just announced that the consumer price index for October came in at 2.3% amid higher food costs. That's quicker than the 1.9% print in September, but slower than the 4.9% recorded in the same month last year. The latest figure is still within the central bank's projected inflation range of between 2 to 2.8%, right smack in the middle. Now, Moody's analytics sees slower economic growth for the Philippines in the third quarter. The ratings agency projects the country's GDP to come in at 5.7% due to restrained consumer spending. Moody's further explains private consumption is muted because of recent policy rate cuts, that they need time to filter through the economy. The country's economy expanded by 6.3% in the second quarter and by 6% in Q3 of last year. The Philippine Statistics Authority will release Q3 GDP data on Thursday, November 7th. The country's manufacturing sector saw a slight dip in growth in October. The S&P Global Philippines Manufacturing PMI, which measures the performance of the manufacturing sector, dropped to 52.9 last month from a 27-month high of 53.7 in September. The slowdown was primarily due to supply-side changes, including material shortages that led to longer delivery times, as well as to cooling in buying activity. Nonetheless, S&P Global noted that the current PMI reading remains the second highest since January 2023. Job creation in the sector also stayed strong, with employment growth reaching its fastest pace in over 7 years. Internet tycoon Dennis Uy is ceding control of his telecom venture as the Singaporean-based Summit Telco Holdings is set to take over Dito CME Holdings. The parent firm of Dito Telecommunity says that it has secured board approval to negotiate the terms for Summit Telco to subscribe to up to 9 billion primary common shares of the company. With this purchase, Summit, which already holds a 25% stake in Dito, will become the controlling shareholder of the Philippines' third largest telecom operator. This investment forms part of Dito's strategy to strengthen its equity position. As of March, the company faced a negative stakeholders' equity of 44.4 billion pesos, attributed to startup costs for launching their telecom services. Now, in other news, Morocco, led by billionaire Manny Pangilinan, raises its sales volume forecast for this year. Now, from an earlier estimate of 4.7%, the power distributor now expects a 6% increase in energy sales, or more than 53,000 gigawatt hours. That's up of nearly 3,000 gigawatt hours in 2023. Morocco cites its record income of 35.1 billion pesos in the first 9 months of the year, mainly attributed to the strong performance of its residential segment. Pangilinan, however, admits that fourth quarter sales might see a slowdown due to fewer operating days and seasonal factors. Now, the Securities and Exchange Commission reminds delinquent and non-compliant corporations to avail of the recently launched Enhanced Compliance Incentive Plan before the November 30th deadline. The ECIP offers reprieve for firms through lower penalties for failure to comply with reportorial documents. Concerned corporations, however, must still address the root cause of their noncompliance and submit the necessary documents to regain good standing. For those who choose not to participate in the ECIP, the SEC has implemented a revised penalty system which imposes significantly higher rates. Now we're taking a quick break. Please stay with us as we dive deep into the numbers and the stories that matter most to your bottom line. Welcome back to Basis Points Trading at the Philippine Stock Exchange open just a few minutes ago. Let's take a look at the initial figures. Now, after ending flat with a slight downward bias yesterday, the PSE index is down by is up by 0.5% to 71.69. So we're seeing buying in the main gauge. All shares index is up as well, up by 0.3%. Now boosting the gains, the gains in the PSE index are coming from the financials, the holding firms, and the property counters. They're the only ones in the green, while the industrial, services, and mining and oil counters are flat with a downward bias. Now, meanwhile, the foreign exchange market, the peso opened slightly weaker at 58.43, from its previous close of 58.34 against the greenback. Now, to help us make sense of the numbers, we're joined by the Chief Equity Strategist of DA Market Securities, Nisha Alisher. Hi, Nisha. Good morning.
Hi, good morning, Maiki.
Nisha, we just got the October inflation print. That's just like hot off the press. It quickened to 2.3% in October. Was this in line with your own expectations? Because it was in line with the BSP's. The BSP was expecting 2 to 2.8% for the period, kind of right in the middle at 2.3%. What did you think of this print?
Sure. An acceleration at this time of the year is not surprising. It is a tick up from the lower inflation figure in September of 1.9%, but it brings us to a year-to-date average of 3.32%, which is still within the BSP target range of between 2 to 4%. Mm-hmm. So a little bit higher than mid.
Mm-hmm. Now, another key data point that we're waiting for this week is GDP. ADB expects GDP for 2024 to come in at 6%, Deutsche Bank at 5.8%, and the government expects it within a range of 6 to 7%. What is your outlook for Q3 GDP?
Well, we're a little bit more on the optimistic side. So we initially had a range of 6 to 6.5%. However, I think following the consensus among other analysts, maybe we might go closer to about 6% for the year, would be a more conservative estimate.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now there's a lot of data points for investors to mull over this week. There's the inflation that just came out. There is GDP that's coming out on Thursday, and also in the United States, the Federal Reserve's Federal Open Market Committee is going to be meeting to decide on interest rates. Expectations are for a 25 basis point reduction. What do you think they're going to do?
Sure, there's been talk of a possible delay. However, we think that the data hasn't exactly changed so much to change that expectation. And so, of course, we're still continue to be data driven, but we do think that we still think that a rate cut would be forthcoming.
Now, another huge event, we're at the eve of the U.S. presidential elections. Americans are going to be voting for their next president in a general election that will be culminating on Tuesday, November 5th. Once the polls close, depending on how tight that race is, it could be hours or even weeks before we know who actually wins. And in this period of uncertainty, how do you think the market is going to react? And what are you advising investors to do while there's so much uncertainty on the horizon?
Sure, I think we have been experiencing that effect. In the U.S., Treasury yields spiked up when they were factoring in a Trump victory, and then there was a sell-off when Kamala Harris would show a lead. Locally, we have enjoyed a pretty generous rally of about 12% from that July low, and people have started taking profit. And at the same time, we think that the risk-off appetite may continue. So it really depends also on how the results would come out. There's also geopolitical tension that's increasing oil price risks. And so that's also contributing to the market sentiment. So currently we're around 7.1 or 7.2 from that high of a close to 7.4, but an intraday high of 7.6. And so we think that the market could find better support around the 7,000 to 6,800 level.
Now, earlier in the show, an analyst over in Wall Street said that the volatility is typical, especially in November, especially during an election year. However, in the final 2 months, the market typically goes higher once all this uncertainty is erased. What do you think of the PSE index? How do you think our trajectory is going to be? Are you sharing a similar view that, with all the uncertainty now, there's going to be a lot of volatility. However, as the year comes to a close, we'll actually see buying action. What's your take on this situation, Nisha?
Yeah, that's right, Maiki. I agree with that. Usually election season, whether in the US or in the Philippines, can provide that kind of risk-off sentiment. But then soon enough, once there's more certainty, considering that it's largely been forecasted what would happen, let's say, if one candidate won over the other. We do think, though, in the Philippine market, we've found very good gains. We would welcome a continued correction, but this is only so that we could buy back short-term profit taking or position some more into longer-term positions. Our medium to long-term outlook is quite positive. That is because we're seeing a low inflationary environment amid lower interest rate trajectory, and then we've got stronger consumer spending from a weaker peso, remittances coming in late in the year, and then also we have the midterm elections and consumer spending that could proceed from that by next year. So we think that these positive convergent factors, could help in bringing the market back up after we test some good supports.
Okay, what are those good supports again, Nisha?
That would be 7,000 or 6,800, and it brings us to a good PE valuation for next year of about 11 times. Market average is around 14 to 16. So that's a pretty good upside that we're looking at also after testing those lows.
Now, in the meantime, given the uncertainty over the near term, can you share with us DA Market Securities core trading positions and their core position and your trading position?
Thank you for that question, Maiki. Yeah, one strategy that we have is to keep those core positions from lows that we've positioned in since the start of this, since the last decline, and then we could have longer term positions from 2020 or even like 2022, but then we also have these core trading trading positions separate from core positions that are able to kind of maximize gains in the swings of stocks. So, for example, a stock like Ayala Land can have volatility within the year. And so what we'd like to do is keep a core position, but also kind of use a trading position to be able to maximize gains as it goes up and down. in a seasonal fashion. We like to kind of stay in position for longer term positions that we would like to be in. Of course, there are selective stock picks that could give you good gains for let's say the year. So Converge, for example, is one stock that has provided gains for investors this year. But moving forward, we may be looking more into blue chip positions such as the larger telcos that give higher dividends, such as Global PLDT.
Okay, thank you, Nisha, for sharing your thoughts on the market with us today. Whether it's over the short term or the long term, there is money to be made in the market.
You're welcome, Maiki. Thank you for having me.
All right, that was Nisha Alisher, the Chief Equity Strategist of DA Market Securities. Now we're taking a quick breather. Basis Points will be right back. Welcome back to Basis Points. A legal victory for tech billionaire Elon Musk and Donald Trump's presidential campaign. A judge in Pennsylvania is allowing Musk to continue his $1 million giveaway to voters. The judge rejected arguments from Philadelphia's district attorney that the sweepstakes were an illegal lottery violating state law. This after lawyers for Musk's political group admitted that they selected the contest winners, based on who could best speak about their pro-Trump agenda. Musk has already given away $16 million to voters. The final winner will be announced on Election Day, November 5th, U.S. time. Still in the must-win state of Pennsylvania, both Donald Trump and Kamala Harris make final appeals to voters on the last day of campaigning. Trump, speaking to his supporters, promises to initiate the largest deportation program of criminals in American history.
I will invoke the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. You know, 1798. That's when they ran the country a little tougher than we run it today. Today you get a little slap in the wrist when you kill somebody. You kill somebody. Oh. And I'm hereby calling for the death penalty for any migrant that kills an American citizen or a law enforcement officer.
Harris, on the other hand, is focusing on strengthening support among Latino voters, addressing a community that was angered after a comedian made offensive remarks at a recent Trump rally. To reinforce her message, Harris was joined by rapper Fat Joe of Puerto Rican and Cuban descent in a final push to rally voters.
The other day in Madison Square Garden, that was no joke, ladies and gentlemen. That was no joke. And it was filled with so much hate. Hatred of Jewish people. Hatred of black people. Carving watermelons. Calling Puerto Rico an island of garbage. My Latinos, where is your pride?
One day left, and we need to finish this strong and get this done. So let's get out the vote. Let's reach out to all of our folks in the next 24 hours, family and friends and classmates and neighbors and co-workers. And as we do, I ask, let us please be intentional about building community.
In other news, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, or OPEC, is optimistic about the strong demand for oil over both the short and long term. With escalating tensions in the Middle East, concerns are growing over potential supply disruptions in the Gulf, a region that produces and exports around 20% of the world's oil and gas. OPEC Secretary General recognizes these worries, but maintains that global oil demand won't peak anytime soon as the world's energy needs continue to rise.
Economic growth doing well despite all the talk about negative economic growth. Yes, there are some challenges, but the picture is not as negative as some make it sound. So all of that has factored into our numbers, which we've been talking about over several years. We're seeing now many others following, in fact, raising their baselines for demand.
In this period of market volatility, oil companies are also urging the next U.S. president to create a more investment-friendly environment, which they believe is essential for sustaining domestic energy growth.
A big important market for us. It's 60% of our business. We have a well-diversified portfolio from the upstream through to biogas to convenience to retail, and we always work with whoever wins an election very comfortably. I suppose the big challenge the U.S. faces right now is regulatory reform, permitting reform, etc. That's the thing that I hope whoever wins the election can really start to tackle, is to make it easier and faster to invest in the United States.
And that's it for Basis Points. I'm Maiki Oreta. We'll be back tomorrow for more news on the financial markets and more. Keep it here on BNC, the Bilyonaryo news channel, always on top.